Welcome, firefighters. It's so good to be here with you live today. And wherever you're watching from, please take a moment to drop your name and where you're joining in from in the comments. I love hearing from you. And to those of you joining for the first time, welcome to Fire Drill Fridays family, where we're building community, learning about the climate crisis, and taking action to address it. You can see lots of ways to take action and get involved at firedrillfridays.com/take action. Today we're going to take a deeper dive into big climate justice win here in California and the lessons we can all learn from it. But first, I've got some other good news to share, and because I'm on the road supporting climate champions running for office, I don't have my xylophone. Doesn't matter. But after a huge all-hands-on-deck effort, we've stopped Senator Manchin and Senator Schumer's dirty deal, which would have fast-tracked oil and gas projects across the country and gutted vital environmental protections like the Clean Water Act. You know, when we first started talking about this on Fire Drill Fridays weeks ago, this deal was, to tell you the truth, it was seen as inevitable. You know, a business as usual backroom deal where Senator Manchin bargained to get Big Oil's wish list on fossil fuel permitting in exchange for his vote on the Inflation Reduction Act. But we stopped it in its tracks. People all over the country made their voices heard and told Congress to keep Manchin's dirty deal out of the must-pass funding bill that keeps the government running. Greenpeacers sent more than 100,000 messages to Congress, and thousands made phone calls, including me and many of you, on our September 2nd Fire Drill Friday with Jean Sue. Hundreds dropped by their representatives' offices in person, and, Greenpeace's executive director, Ebony, even got arrested at the Senate for peacefully protesting alongside other environmental leaders. What happened was we created a surround sound effect and a show of power that was impossible to ignore. More than 80 House Democrats and a handful of brave senators publicly opposed the deal. And just hours before the Senate voted on the funding bill, Manchin announced he was removing his permitting reform, which it wasn't, from the bill because it didn't have the support to pass. It's pretty depressing to think that some Republicans voted against it because it wasn't generous enough to the fossil fuel industry. I mean, can you imagine? But this is your victory, and I'm so grateful to each and every one of you who were part of it. Now, down the line, Schumer could still try to pass this deal another way, so we have to remain vigilant. But for now, the dirty deal is dead, 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 dead. And we showed the strength of our movement. We showed that politicians can't pull a fast one on us without a fight like hell on their hands. So cheers. Here's to us. Yay. And the good news doesn't stop. Today we're taking a deep, deep, deep dive on some great news from California. Really important news. We'll get behind the scenes look at what really took place to pass Senate Bill 1137. Now, you've heard us talk a lot on Fire Drill Friday about the importance of establishing health and safety buffers between fossil fuel infrastructure and communities. Well, this bill represents an historic public health and climate justice victory. It establishes a 3,200-foot setback between oil and gas drilling and sensitive sites like homes and schools and hospitals and nursing homes. We'll hear about the decades-long fight led by frontline communities who just wanted to breathe clean air. And you'll hear about what comes next. And we'll pull out the lessons learned from this big win to help us strengthen the climate movement as a whole. But first, why is establishing a 3,200-foot setback between oil and gas drilling and communities, why is this a big deal? It sounds like a no-brainer, don't drill where kids play, right? Doctors and scientists have known for more than a decade that oil and gas wells emit volatile organic compounds, particulate matter, and toxics like benzene, causes cancer, but all of them have been found to negatively impact human health. We're talking about asthma, respiratory disease, cancer, more severe consequences from COVID-19, preterm births, and higher risk for infant mortality. And the closer you are to the source of pollution, obviously, the worse the impact. So, it's funny. Despite our reputation in this state for being such a liberal and environmentally conscious state, California was, up until last month, one of the only major oil-producing states in the U.S. that had not established any sort of buffer zone. Yet 2.7 million Californians live within 3,200 feet of oil and gas drilling. There are wells in the backyard of homes, in parking lots, in store parking lots, on school playgrounds. I've shown them on Fire Drill Fridays for a couple of years. I mean, it's outrageous. It's unconscionable. And the people living there know it. They've been fighting for a decade to establish setbacks to protect their family's health. The fight to create common sense protections from oil and gas drilling it's a long and storied history with a lot of political delays, uphill battles, unwavering perseverance from the frontline communities. And then finally, on August 12th, Governor Newsom called on the state legislature to pass a whole package of climate legislation, including SB 1137, a bill that would end neighborhood drilling. And just a few weeks later, on the 11th hour of the very last day of the legislature for this season, the session for this year, the California State Legislature approved the bill. And on September 16, Newsom signed it into law. Soon, California's no longer going to issue permits to drill new wells or rework existing wells inside this buffer zone of 3,200 feet. Or you probably don't know, I didn't know until a few years ago, that California oil it's very thick and sluggy, and many wells require reworking and retrofitting for what's called enhanced oil recovery techniques like steam and chemical injections in order to remain productive. And those steam and those chemical injections are really, really dangerous and polluting to the community. So, with no new permits and no rework permits allowed, we're going to see the eventual phase out of neighborhood drilling in California. And in the meantime, new pollution control measures will make it more expensive for oil and gas companies to continue drilling near our homes and schools, and it's going to help speed up the full phase out of neighborhood drillings. This is a huge deal for millions of Californians who live within the 3,200 feet of an oil well, who can now let out a collective sigh of relief that their immediate health won't continue to be sacrificed for big oil's profit. And the climate benefits are also, really significant. Currently, neighborhood drilling accounts for nearly 25% of oil production in California. As we've talked about many, many times on this show, scientists are urgently telling us to tackle the climate crisis, we must proactively phase out fossil fuels at the same time we increase renewable energy. The fact that California, a major oil-producing state, just passed a bill that could help phase out 25% of its oil production, this is no small potatoes, believe me. This win is also an important one for precedent setting. California is consistently seen as a first mover on climate within the United States. California's setback distance is now the biggest in the country, 3,200 feet. Usually it's like 1,500 feet or just over, but 3,200 feet is a half a mile. And this is significant because it's actually the distance that epidemiologists recommend in order to mitigate the worst public health impacts. This is truly policy based on science, which is what we desperately need more of, especially in climate policy. And with pressure and California's example, more states could follow suit. And you better believe the oil and gas industry is not happy. Fossil fuel companies have been fighting the very idea of setbacks for years, and they do not like losing. They've been profiting for decades at the expense of people's health. Over the past 4 years, oil and gas companies dumped almost $77.5 million into lobbying California electeds and poured even more into trying to stop the setbacks bill, even putting out, I kid you not, totally misleading memes telling legislators to vote no in order to save the sloths. Can you believe that? So it's no surprise that just days after Governor Newsom signed this historic bill, Big Oil started what we can assume will be a well-funded attempt to overturn this law. You know, in California, anybody can put an initiative on the ballot if they gather enough signatures. That seems democratic, right? But unfortunately, getting signatures often comes down to money. And this system gets abused by special interests to overturn laws. 79% of Californians support a strong buffer zone between oil and gas and the community. And yet, fossil fuel companies are trying to hijack our democratic process to get their way. But we know how to fight back. The massive grassroots power built through a decade of organizing, public education, and pressure is not going away. We beat Big Oil once, and we can do it again. It's this kind of fierce, persistent, united pressure that we need to push at all levels of government, all across the country, to win and defend bold climate solutions. And you know, while this victory belongs to the frontline communities, it also would not have been possible without the lawmakers who chose to stand with public health over polluters. It reminds us just how important it is to elect leaders at all levels of government who want to go to bat for us. This is critical to how we win on climate, because meaningful, tangible change often doesn't come from the top of the ticket. We need change at every level, so we need to vote for climate at every level. Make sure that you're ready and registered to vote, and sign up to get out the vote. Help us get people out by visiting firedrillfridays.com/takeaction. Now, lucky for us today, we have two amazing guests to tell the story of how this victory in California really happened and help us make sense of the lessons that can strengthen our movement. I am so thrilled to have California State Senator Lena Gonzalez here with us today from California's 33rd Senate District in South Los Angeles. Senator Gonzalez serves as Majority Whip for California, for Democrats in the California Senate. And by the way, she was the co-author of the oil and gas setbacks bill that we've been talking about, SB 1137. And together with the senator, I'm so glad to be joined by Maricruz Ramirez. She is a community organizer with the Center on Race, Poverty, and the Environment. She was born and raised in Bakersfield, which is in Kern County, the epicenter of oil production in California, where neighborhood drilling is rampant. She's a fierce frontline advocate who she marched 266 miles in the summer of 2021 to raise awareness and gain support for climate action. Now that is an organizer. Welcome, Senator Gonzalez and Maricruz. I can't tell you how I appreciate your taking time to join me today. Welcome. So first, I want to know from each of you, how does it feel after such a long fight to have played a critical role in passing historic public health and climate legislation in California? And I'm going to start with you, Senator Gonzalez. Tell us how it feels.
Yep. Well, first off, thank you so much for having me. This is an incredible opportunity for us to showcase what California has done on our climate commitment. And so thank you so much, Jane, and your whole team. So for me, growing up also, I represent Long Beach and Southeast Los Angeles. I grew up in the same neighborhood that I represent. So my skyline was always oil rigs, refineries, and polluted skies, unfortunately, here in the South Bay and in North Long Beach. So for me to be now a state senator and being an integral part of this incredible piece of legislation, like you mentioned, is historic for setbacks for people, everyday people, to me feels really great. To do so with a coalition of over 120 environmental organizations that have been fighting this, as you mentioned, for over a decade, that also live and work in the same neighborhoods that they're fighting for. It's incredible. And we know we still have to keep up the fight even though. So it feels really great is my short answer.
Congratulations. And Maricruz, I know you have a personal stake in this fight. How did it feel for you when the setback bill was finally signed into law?
We don't get many environmental victories in Kern County, so this victory has been particularly sweet. I know how long community members and organizers have been fighting for this victory for more than 10 years. So to see all that time and energy be put into the setbacks fight and finally result in something this major has been just, it makes my heart feel very full, and I'm just completely elated. And like you mentioned, I did have a personal stake because being born and raised here, I have family members and I know so many people who have suffered respiratory issues because of the bad air quality due to oil. So I just feel very happy that we're finally doing something to fight against the big oil and, hopefully get our air cleaner. So short answer, I feel just ecstatic and happy.
Good for you. Senator Gonzalez, tell us a little bit about Senate Bill 1137, the bill that you authored and championed, the one that just became law in California. Why is this win important to Californians?
Well,
And
gosh.
for the rest of the country, in fact, in the world, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, Maricruz said it best. I mean, living in the same area that we're now both representing in terms of fighting for the environmental justice frontline communities is really a very, it gives you pause, it really does. And SB 1137, again, has been sort of years in the making, but SB 1137 does a couple things. First, it ensures that there's going to be no new oil drilling near sensitive uses, which are places that you live, residences, hospitals, nursing homes, daycare, schools. It seems so, it goes without saying, it is so simple in that sense, is that we don't want oil drilling near children, people that have respiratory illnesses, especially during this time of COVID. What a better time to do it. And then second piece is to ensure that there's with the existing wells, to ensure that there's pollution controls, additional notification for leak detections, alarms, water sampling, should folks want water sampling in their neighborhoods. We know that there are, like in my neighborhood of Signal Hill and of North Long Beach and in Southeast Los Angeles, in some cases, people are living as close as 25 feet from an oil rig, from an oil drill. It is, I can't imagine it anymore in our future. So this bill is essential for those reasons, to protect people, ensure that there's better health outcomes. But the 3,200 feet setback, as you mentioned, also is historic. There is no other setback distance like that in the country. It is not politically backed. It is science backed, because there were a group of folks that came together, all with physicians and epidemiologists and so many folks with extensive experience, that said, this needs to be science-backed and data-driven. And that's exactly why 3,200 feet was selected. And we know that other states have enacted shorter distances, some as small as 25 feet, which is laughable to me. And so for us as California, as the fifth largest economy, to come out and say that we're doing this, I think sets a precedent, absolutely, and ensures that no more drilling where we're living, and continues our climate commitment.
Maricruz, from your perspective, what was at stake at getting this bill passed? Why does it matter so much to you and to communities like yours?
Honestly, it's human lives that were at stake in getting this bill passed. From production to climate disasters, there's no question that fossil fuels and neighborhood drilling hurt people. And to make this matter even personal to me, it's low-income communities and, Black, Indigenous, Latinx, and AAPI communities that get hurt the most. And without setbacks, they are put into what the oil industry calls sacrifice zones. And these are the people who are most affected by oil production. And they're left in the dust to suffer from negative health effects. I think of my own father, who every winter he gets this really bad asthmatic cough. And, He suffers from other respiratory issues because we live in the county with the worst short-term and year-round particle pollution. So there's far too many people who are affected by respiratory issues, cardiovascular disease, and cancer. So that's what was at stake here, human lives and their health.
Wow. Maricruz, I'd love to know the details, what really happened to get us to this place where this has become law. What's the story behind this headline? Start at the beginning of the fight for the setbacks. Take us through it a little bit.
All right, so it all starts in a small town called Arvin in 2014. Arvin is southeast of Bakersfield, and there was a gas leak from a pipeline that was connected to an active oil operation. And this pipeline ended up leading to several homes, and families who lived in those homes had to be evacuated for over 8 months. And unfortunately, they weren't getting any type of assistance, and they were left to fend for themselves. So obviously they turned to help to the Committee for a Better Arvin, and then my job, CRPE. And over the course of the next 4 years, they tried to collect as many petition signatures as possible to do something about this. And they talked to city officials. And in the end, they were able to collect enough signatures and make enough noise to bring attention to the fact that there was an ordinance that had failed to keep up with current technology and with Arvin's population. The ordinance was a part of oil and gas codes that had not been updated since before the moon landing. And life has changed since then. So over the course of 4 years, they were able to really make a lot of noise. And finally, in June 2018, the Arvin Planning Commission approved an ordinance to make amendments to the city oil and gas codes to prevent new operations near houses and other sensitive areas. And most significantly, they put in a setback. Back then, that was a record-breaking setback for California of 300 feet. And with that success, they were like, why not continue fighting for better setbacks? And not just in Arvin, but in the rest of the state. So they were like, let's do this. And they've been on the ground fighting ever since then. And it's been great to see how far we've come, and to get all the way to 3,200 feet is amazing.
I really congratulate you and thank you for that bit of history. Senator Gonzalez, after other failed attempts to pass similar bills and a delayed regulatory process, how did we pull this off? Why was it different this time?
I came in this as a state senator from 2019, and seeing that I had known that there'd been many failed attempts in the past. But again, living in the community, knowing that for a long time here in Los Angeles, at least, it didn't really start with one single thing. It was just a mix of just this environmental injustice that had been occurring within Southeast cities and West Long Beach and in places like South Los Angeles, where people just felt, we're literally getting dumped on. There is, oil wells everywhere. We've got diesel trucks coming in and out of our port. We've got extreme heat episodes with people living in certain overcrowded situations, and all of that. And so people just, I came in 2019 feeling like people were just angry with the government not acting. And in 2020, Assembly Member El Marisucci brought forward a bill that essentially asked the Department of Conservation to create guidelines for setbacks, not establishing a specific number, but just saying, let's at least create guidelines. Let's start somewhere. That died in the first policy committee. He couldn't even get it through the first policy committee. Then cut to 2021. Senators Wiener and Limon were drafting SB 467, and that established a 2,500 foot setback, and also also had language that said no hydraulic fracking. So it was a more robust bill and lots of support, of course. Again, could not get it through the first policy committee.
Yeah.
This was incredible. And so having had that precedent and that historic sort of nature of where climate sort of ends up and where it dies in the legislature, we knew we had issues in both houses, quite frankly. And so this year, we, of course, had a lot more. It was like a different take on this. We had an unprecedented budget surplus. We committed $54 billion from our budget surplus towards climate, ran the gamut of energy and drought and zero emission technology. And then we also had the governor weigh in with the Senate Democratic Caucus, at least, to say, we need climate done now. We can't just do low-hanging fruit climate like we've done in the past. We need a robust package. Him and his team and the Senate Democratic Caucus, is who I can speak for, came together and said, yes, we're gonna bite, we're gonna take this, we're gonna move forward. And that's where SB 1137 came forward. And I, along with Senator Limon, authored the bill with, again, so many incredible environmental advocates that have been on the front lines. But we were also very skeptical. So got through the process, of course, and signed signed in early September, but not without a lot of hits along the way too.
Thanks. Now, to those of you watching, this is a really important lesson in why it's important to vote down ballot, why state legislatures are so important. It's so important to know whether you're a Republican or Democrat if your representative takes money from the fossil fuel industry, because I know that for a decade and more, there were plenty of moderate Democrats in the California state legislature that were getting money from the fossil fuel industry and voted against these wonderful pieces of legislation. It's the main reason that it took so long. So again, I just want to encourage everybody to think down ballot and not just, Senate and Congress. So, this new law addresses fossil fuel production in California. And Maricruz, can you tell us why so much activism is about phasing out fossil fuel production instead of just focusing on increasing, solar panels, renewable energy, electrical vehicles, and things like that?
Mm-hmm. Well, we definitely should tackle climate injustices from both sides, investing in renewables and rapidly phasing out fossil fuels. But it's not enough just to create incentives for electric vehicles if we're not at the same time taking steps to ending existing extraction and production, because otherwise we're still headed for climate catastrophe. We're still going to continue to see harm in the same low income communities that have suffered the worst harms for years. Yeah. And neighborhood drilling is really just like lead paint and asbestos, and the fact that we have science telling us that it's a bad thing. We just need the political will to actually protect communities like mine and do something about it.
Yeah. There's a Greenpeace activist came up with this metaphor, which I love. Addressing the climate crisis by only talking about renewable energy and electric vehicles, etc., is like trying to bail out a boat with a can, but not stopping the hole. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah, correct.
Senator Gonzalez, what about workers in the oil and gas industry? How will they be impacted? This is something we really have to think about.
Absolutely. And I thank you for this question, because when we're talking a lot about environmental policy, and especially with the Senate Democratic Caucus, as we got together for almost nearly a year to figure out what type of legislation we wanted to put forward, one of the first key stakeholders we met with were our friends in labor. And so we have to include them in this discussion at all times. We can't ever forget that there is a workforce here. And in the state of California, it's nearly 11,000 in the oil extraction business across the state. But we also know, while we're talking about, the types of jobs that may be phased out because we want to be more environmental, of course, and respond with robust climate action, we have to look to the future. And that is the space of remediation and plugging the abandoned wells. We know that there could be potential jobs of upwards of 19 to 20,000 jobs in that space. And then additional jobs with this oil well setback bill, and ensuring that we're phasing them out and really adopting a workforce that understands that we are transitioning. We want to do so mindfully. And we want to keep them in the conversation. We don't want to make them fall off of a cliff, despite what the oil and gas industry tells them. I'm the daughter of a Teamster. I have a father who was in the trades. So if anyone understands how important it is to ensure that people do have food on the table for their families, like skilled and trained work, I certainly understand that. And I want folks to know when we're pushing these laws, it's not without thinking about them. So there are opportunities for us in this new wave of climate action.
Thank you, Senator. You know, it's not the fault of the fossil fuel workers that we're facing a climate crisis, right?
Right.
They're the workers and doing extremely difficult and dangerous jobs. And as you said, we cannot leave them behind. It's called just transition. We have to make sure that there's no space between when they end their fossil fuel jobs and when they start a new job, which, as you said, could be capping wells, cleaning up old wells, or it could be moving into solar panels and wind turbines and things like that.
Absolutely.
Now, those jobs, the renewable jobs, for the most part right now, are not union or union equivalent jobs. They don't pay as well. So it's, you know, of course that the fossil fuel workers are going to fight to keep their very well paying union jobs. So we also, I wish we could depend on our government to do it, but we have to fight to make sure that the solar jobs, all of the renewable energy jobs, are union or union equivalent, right?
Absolutely. Prevailing wage, all of it. We want to make sure that those are really good paying jobs with healthcare benefits.
Right. Maricruz, what happens next in the quest to end neighborhood drilling in California? When are we going to see the real change for communities, do you think?
So the journey with this particular bill is not completely over. Having been signed into law by Governor Newsom, SB 1137 should go into effect on January 1st, 2023. However, it's not a big surprise that there is great opposition from big oil, and they're attempting to stop setbacks from happening with the referendum. So by gathering nearly a million signatures in a 90-day period, they could stop 1137 from going into effect and have setbacks actually be put on the 2024 ballot for Californians to vote on.
Wow. Senator Gonzalez, what do you make of the potential referendum to overturn your bill? Is it just big oil abusing democracy?
It is, but it's also, it's part of their operational scheme, if you will, their MO, right? I mean, this is what they do often with these bills, especially when it comes to environmental justice bills, which are much harder to get off the legislative floor, as I just described. They will do anything in their power, money, the greed, to be able to just overturn what the majority of the legislature, the majority of the governors and his team, the majority of residents of California that really care about this. The majority of them want oil well setbacks. They don't want to continue pollution in their neighborhoods. So it is that sort of MO that they use in the referendum process as a tool to overturn SB 1137. And they have to get about, as Maricruz mentioned, over 600,000 signatures, in which they pay people oftentimes to get these signatures. And they create this scheme to get these signatures, and they have to do so by early December of this year. And then you could see a special election next year or a 2024 election in November, in which they say, well, we don't need oil well setbacks. It's up or down. What do you think about it? But again, as we know, the referendum process is so tricky, and oftentimes their language looks as though they're being environmental when they're not. So we're here to say that, this referendum is bad news, but they've done this again in other issues. When it comes to minimum wage, we've seen it obviously with abortion rights, women and pregnant people having the right to reproductive health care. We've seen it across the country. This isn't just new to oil and gas, but this is one operative scheme that they're going to use to overturn this bill.
Right. Thank you, Senator. Let me ask you also, what is this story of Senate Bill 1137 and how it came to pass? What does this mean for the elections and how we vote? I mean, the midterm elections are coming right up soon. What does it mean for how we vote?
Again, this SB 1137, even though there was precedent and had gone through the legislature in different forms 2 years before, 120 environmental justice advocates that have been so incredible on the front lines. All of this great support. Even with that, we still had Democrats that voted against this bill or that didn't show up to vote. And so it is so important and imperative that in these midterm elections, we know that the climate crisis is not something to be messed around with. And if people they might not deny climate action, but they delay it. And that's still as bad as climate denial, in my opinion. And there are Democrats doing that, and of course, Republicans doing that, and everyone in between. And it's not just your state legislatures and your federal governments, it's local city council members. I live in a city that has over 100-year relationship with oil, where we're really trying to move forward. And I need my city council at the Long Beach City Council level to be supportive of climate action, because if not, we'll continue to have oil wells. We'll continue to have the oil and gas industry lobbying them on projects here locally, and we cannot have that. It's so imperative that we pay close attention to these midterm elections and how people vote on climate action.
And to vote down ballot, and
Absolutely.
how important state legislatures are. Let's just sum it up. This is for both of you. What are the top lessons learned from this victory that you want climate activists everywhere to know? Let's start with you, Maricruz.
I want climate activists to see this victory as definite proof that people power is so important, and that it makes all the difference in the world. It's easy to see the climate crisis as an overwhelming and colossal and scary problem that can't be defeated by us humans. However, there is great power when we band together. And every social movement in history that has accomplished anything has done so because of people power. And so even though it is easy to feel small and insignificant sometimes, there is a group of fellow fighters out there waiting for every one of us to take up the fight. And together we can achieve great things.
Yay. Want to add anything to that, Senator Gonzalez?
Maricruz said it perfectly. Don't give up. I mean, again, this took many, many years, but we finally got there. Wow. And we have to band together. Again, these environmental justice advocates, we can't thank them enough for continuing to fight, beating down the door of so many members, even my own. I said, throw me in the mix and keep me accountable too, because that's why we're elected. We need to ensure that we continue to fight this good fight, and it's not over. We still have so many other elements of environmental justice that we have to get to that are still not, haven't been legislated on. So don't give up, and know that some of us in California, if there's help needed in other states, if we can be of support in any way in other states to make sure that climate action gets done across the country, we will do so.
Thank you very much, Senator Gonzalez and Maricruz, for joining us today, and congratulations for this historic and hard-won victory. This win it's a powerful reminder that we're stronger together, that organizing gets the goods, and persistence really pays off. I get asked a lot whether I think social media, the fact that we have the internet now on our iPhones, whether that has made organizing easier. And it's good to remind ourselves, it's made getting people together very fast easier. But building a movement you can't do on a cell phone. You can't do it with internet. Building a movement that wins victories like Senate Bill 1137, it takes time. It takes persistence. It takes going door to door and talking to people. And that's what we have to do. We're building movements, not just getting people to come together for one demonstration. And patience is so important. But good news doesn't come without good old-fashioned elbow grease. We all have a part to play for a cleaner, greener future. And you know the drill, friends. To make change, we need to take action. So right now, that means getting out the climate vote in the midterm elections. We can't hold the politicians accountable to the will of the people if they're already bought and sold by fossil fuel companies from the minute they step into office. We have to elect leaders that will put the planet and people over corporate profits. So here's what you can do. First, make sure you're registered and ready to vote. Have a plan. Then go to firedrillfridays.com/takeaction and click on to make sure you're registered to vote at your current address and to check all the details on how and when you can vote by mail or early in person or on election day. Do it now. Second, vote like the planet depends on it, because it does. Do your homework so you know who's going to stand up for people and the planet all the way up and down the ballot, as I said. As we've seen today, important change doesn't always come from the federal government. State government actions have huge consequences. So do county boards of supervisors. They make critical land use decisions that could make or break new fossil fuel infrastructure projects. City controllers are uniquely positioned to further climate action on the local level by holding departments accountable to the goals that they set. These races truly matter and collectively make a big difference to our movement. You can find out if your candidates have pledged to not take money from oil and gas companies, PACs, or lobbyists at nofossilfuelmoneypledge.com. That's nofossilfuelmoneypledge.com. And here's the third thing: get out the vote. We can't just preach to the choir or stay in our small circles. We have to get climate voters out to the polls this election. You can do this through registering people to vote, making phone calls, or knocking on doors. It can be intimidating. I have done this for many decades, and I get really nervous out there. I still get jitters before I knock on doors or calling up strangers. But it's so incredibly important that we do it. I'm scared, but I do it. Nothing beats people talking to people to make real change. So go to firedrillfridays.com/take action to get connected to local events near you and volunteer with others in your community. It's also a great way to build community, which is something else that is going to be crucial as the climate gets more extreme. The next few weeks will have enormous impact on what we can accomplish together in the next few years. And we have 8 years, that's 4 election cycles, including this one coming up in November. So if you've been sitting on the fence, this is the time to get on your feet and take action. Again, firedrillfridays.com/take action to get plugged into local opportunities near you. And then next week, join me at 11 Eastern Time, 11 in the morning, 11 a.m. Pacific Time, 11 a.m. Pacific Time, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, with entrepreneur co-host of the Bellas podcast and World Wrestling Entertainment superstar, I kid you not, Brie Bella. We're going to have a conversation with Greenpeace campaigner and wildfire expert, because we're going to be talking about fire, Dr. Amy Moas, on how climate change is hitting home with wildfires in the West and what we can do about it. Thank you all for being part of the fight. I love you from the bottom of my heart for joining me in this, and I'll see you next time.